Today we are very excited to have Temple Hayes with us. Temple, thank you so much for joining us. We are really excited.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm excited too. Absolutely.
Awesome. So I think before we get into our conversation, I was going to see if Temple, maybe you wanted to lead us in just a brief meditation just to get us anchored in the moment, and then we can get it started. What do you think?
I think that sounds wonderful. So let's just all join together and take a moment and just close your outer eyes so your inner eye, your third eye, may reveal itself. And just hold sacred in the moment the power of the silence. For the silence blesses the teacher within us and creates a sense within us that all is well. For a healthy teacher archetype knows that the right people are here, everything's in divine order, and all is happening the way it's supposed to. We're able to let go of control, any illusion of control, any falsehoods of self or limitation. We can let that all go as we just immerse ourselves into the holy being of infinity, which is right now. For right now is where the power is. Right now is where you feel yourself tuning in and the light covering your face and the deepening of your roots and connecting to the great earth in which we live and move and have our being. In this moment, we become aware that our heart is beating, and yet we haven't instructed it to do so, not one time today. It is beating naturally. We also become aware that we are breathing. What an awareness. That indeed we are breathing without consciously instructing ourselves always throughout the day, please breathe. And so within this conscious connection, we are aware that there is something that is greater than we are, that is operating as law in us. And in our humanity, expressing the consistent spirituality in which we are, we give thanks that these gifts are given to us without any work on our part, just allowing and letting be. So we immerse ourselves with our time together this afternoon in conscious recovery, knowing that each and every one of us are part of a recovery of something, of someone, of some moment. And that is the beauty of life. For life is always about expanding and bringing in a new way as we are emerging into this evolving self, this evolutionary being, powerful beyond measure. And we give thanks. There's an inner joy that we feel within our hearts as we know the greatest part of life is the mystery of what we don't know yet. And so it is.
So it is.
And so it shall be.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
There we are.
Beautiful.
Wow. Thank you so much, Temple. That was amazing.
Oh, bless you.
Okay. So I think before we get into the conversation, Temple, I was wondering if you could give us just a brief introduction to your work and who you are. Doesn't have to be your whole official bio by any means, but just a little bit so we can get to know you.
Boring if I list my bio. It would not only be boring, but I would feel a little like, oh gosh, who overachieved that? 13th step program would be necessary. No, my name is Temple Hayes. I think the joy of that with me is that Temple is my natural name. It was my grandfather's middle name. I am the spiritual leader of First Unity Spiritual Campus. We are a global campus. We serve people all over the world, and we are known also for our sacred activism. So we do pet adoption, we help the homeless, we're very action oriented. And I am the founder of an online university called ILLY, the Institute for Leadership and Lifelong Learning International, ILI.org. And that is because there is such a strong need for true warrior, sacred leaders today. And I wanted to play a part in some subtle, if not profound way of being a part of individuals' lives. Because more than ever, we need true tribal leaders. So how was that? Was that short
That was
enough?
perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, I've definitely heard a lot about you, and I'm excited to look into those things. It sounds pretty incredible. And for today's conversation, TJ and I, before we got on, were talking about what topics we could use as a launch point for our conversation. And something that rang true for both of us, especially over the last week, was the difficulties that we're having, the challenges that we're experiencing with the shelter in place, and emotionally what that's doing for us. And so what I was going to do, if you guys don't mind, is actually read a section out of Conscious Recovery called Choosing Happiness. What do you guys think?
I think that's great.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. So here we go. So first, let me clarify what I mean by happiness. Happiness in this sense is more than a feeling. It's more than a rush of ecstasy, more than having a great day or even a great year, more than the experience of health or the absence of pain. It's more than the security that comes with external success. Furthermore, happiness is not simply flipping the story or looking for the good in all things. It's a state of contentment and a level of satisfaction with what is. We might call it joy. In the book, How We Choose to Be Happy by Greg Hicks and R.F. Foster, the authors interviewed people from around the world, both happy people and unhappy people. They found 9 basic choices that truly happy people have made. These are not attributes, activities, or feelings. They're choices. You might be surprised to hear that one of those choices happy people make is the choice to feel emotions deeply. Happy people choose to embrace all their feelings. When happy people lose someone, they hurt, they grieve, they feel loss. Loss and sorrow are just as much a part of an authentic, integrated life as feelings of satisfaction and joy. When truly happy people allow themselves to feel deeply, those feelings pass through them, which allows them to return to their natural state of presence and joy.
Mm.
I love
I'd
that.
like to meet that author, wouldn't you? I mean, that's I'm very impressed. Whoever wrote that is pretty organized and has done a lot of inner emotional work. That's what I know for sure.
It sounds like he's onto something, huh, Temple?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So I would like to start the conversation by naming that for myself over the last, since the beginning of the Sheltered in Place, there's been a wide range of emotions. And recently, I'd say over the last week or so, one of those was this deep sadness, a deep longing for connection with other people, feeling as though every day is the same, and not having any variety it can be a lot. And not, of course, the biggest thing that I'm missing is my connection with other people. And so I'm wondering if either of you have had a similar experience and what that's been like.
Yeah, I can, and just first of all, thank you both for being here. And I love the reading. Yeah, I'd like to meet that author as well. I think that sounds really great. Now, I want to start by just kind of sharing a little bit about why I wrote it that way in Conscious Recovery, and then answer your question about what I've been experiencing. I spent so much of my life believing that I shouldn't feel certain things. Right. And I realized well into my spiritual path, my recovery, I realized that a big part of the human experience is actually leaning in and feeling. And if we look at a really small child, they're very present with what they're feeling. And I started becoming really aware that a part of happiness and a part of joy is being present with what is. suffering was created in my life by thinking I shouldn't feel that way, or I shouldn't think that, or I shouldn't do that. And, you know, Temple and I have been in New Thought. I started in New Thought in 1988, and I quickly grabbed on to the idea of everything is love and light. I'm going to use affirmations. All that is really wonderful. And I was also kind of rejecting parts of myself. There was a subtle and not so subtle attempt to not feel. As I continued on my spiritual path and in my recovery, I recognized that it's only going through those feelings that I actually return to the natural state of joy, right? So it was in my running from or pushing down those emotions that was actually creating suffering in my life. And when I realized I could actually turn toward them and integrate them, I had more joy. Those feelings naturally, work through me, or they pass through me, and I do return to that state of joy. So at this point in my life, I welcome all of it. The key here is, do I have a judgment, or have I attached a story to the feeling, right? Because if I'm feeling sad one day, the old paradigm would be like, oh, let me come up with some tools to not feel sad. Let me use some affirmations to not feel sad. Let me figure out a way to change this.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, what's happening with that is it's useful to a certain extent, but I'm also creating suffering in my life. And now I welcome it all. And, Temple already spoke to this a little. Can I just be curious about this? Can I be curious and open? So I have experienced a roller coaster like everyone else I'm imagining during this, but I do recognize that I have a choice. I can feel it. I can let it move through me, but the choice is I don't have to attach it to a story. And for me, the story was usually I shouldn't feel this way, or I'm oh so spiritual. Why am I feeling sad? So I'm really grateful to have shifted that paradigm in my own life, and it's a moment-to-moment practice.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I feel in that way, my path was very similar after 15 years of drinking constantly. I was either on the softball field, at work, or high as a kite at the age 14 to 29. And so then my deeper involvement with New Thought was being able to move into, I'm just happy. I'm just, because I'm happy and just happy, and not really dealing with the practicality of reality. And so in that space, there's a statement that says that, and it's true, that children are afraid of noise. We have two natural fears: noise, loud noises, and guilt. I mean, sorry, loud noise, and the fear of falling. Guilt and all the other thoughts and feelings we learn from other people. And what's interesting is that as children, we're terrified of loud noise. Adults, we're terrified of quiet, of being still, of the silence. And so one of the things that I would invite people to look at is, because some people have been still so long and so non-busy for so long, you may feel a lot of sadness because you are intuiting the sadness on the planet, because you're feeling an energy and a vibration that, because you are in your stillness, there's not been the room or the capacity for that to come in before. And if you are one of those people, I would urge you not to be overwhelmed by it, but to use the tools that TJ is talking about to just be aware of it. I mean, we literally have the capacity, as Marianne Williamson says, beyond measure, beyond the capacity that most of us have ever tapped into, that we can feel when something's happening in China, in Japan. We can feel if a hurricane is coming. We have those kind of feelings. So you want to be aware, the more we step into a feeling body, of who it belongs to and why we're having it. But you make a very strong point there, Jeremy, that a lot of people are going to be having new feelings that they've never recognized before, because it's almost forced upon them, if you will, in this long period of being quiet and being still. For me, personally, my life hasn't changed that much. I'm pretty much doing the same things in so many ways. I'm talking about my ritual and my schedule. Obviously, I'm not having public gatherings, and a lot of those things have shifted. But as far as my day-to-day life, not so much. But I can feel in the moments of welcoming, I can feel an energy. And one of the things that all of us can feel is we can feel more of the earth than we've ever been able to, probably in our lifetime. Mm-hmm. Maybe some of us that are older, in the very beginning of our years, when it actually was called an event to actually go to a park. That used to be called an event, and people got in the car to go do it. Where now it's like, now we can't do that. But even worse than that, people think of that as that's all we're going to do. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so, Temple, in your experience with feeling into these varying emotions, what would be some things that people could do in order to adapt to this? Like you mentioned, the feelings that we've never experienced before. What are some things that people can do to be with that and process it?
I feel journaling is always powerful. Another thing that we've taught through the years is to write with your opposite hand. Mm. So you were making a reference to, you were having a moment and you were feeling deep sadness, and it was really coming through. If you have some unlined paper and you write with the opposite hand, what you start getting into is your inner child. And you just kind of free flow with the thought. You're not writing a sentence. You're not writing a book. Nobody's going to read it. It's not going to be on Zoom, on screen share. It's just private. And you allow to see where it's going to take you. So I think for me, that's why TJ and I are like, when it comes to feelings, we're like and I only say that because he and I have talked on several shows through the years. We're like the perfect blending, because he's saying your feelings are your greatest friends. They are your allies. They are not your adversaries. As long as you treat them as they're your adversaries, you may find in a place of going to war within yourself. You may be divided within yourself. I have a quote, "United we stand, divided we are merely a distraction." So if we make friends with our feelings, we see them as sacred. We're there for a reason. I can't imagine anybody saying, "I'm not comfortable being angry and I want my anger to go away." And I go, "Oh, really?" When I hear about somebody that's killed their child, I'm mad, okay? And when I stop being mad, please, I don't ever need to speak in public life ever again. I'm very angry and mad about that. Mm. But it's the judgment or the resistance of that. But I also think there's another part that's very important. And that is that I work with so many people shamanically that I understand a lot of people carry feelings that are not their feelings. They belong to their mother. They belong to their father. Their grandfather raised them and influenced them. And they're carrying deep-rooted depression or anger and aggression. And it would be emotions that are displaced, you see. So they could go to therapy for years to try to get an answer. Why am I so depressed? But somebody needs to say, are you sure that you're having the feelings that belong to you? Because if you are an intuitive person, just the very nature of talking to someone on the phone, you can bring in, or Zoom, you can bring in their emotions, the collective, you see, and have them as part of your feelings. Mm-hmm. It's a much broader way of answering your question, Jeremy, but I do think to both of them, if you're looking at your life, you want to look at both of those.
Right. TJ, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I love everything Temple just said, of course, and I'm thinking about the human experience that is also the spiritual experience, right? We come into this world as these whole and perfect spiritual beings, and then we start absorbing, Temple's talking about absorbing generational trauma. She didn't use that term, but we're taking on the collective consciousness, right? And I remember being very, very young, and the first time I was in the presence of certain energies, and remembering feeling afraid, feeling something wasn't right here. And I remember closing down. And one of the things that might be happening right now as Temple used the word force, and I think that's really a great word, because sometimes, we're a very doing culture, America. Let's go, let's do, let's create, let's be really, really busy. And we even have memes that like, I put in 15 hours today. Yeah. Right. And so what we're kind of being forced to do right now, many of us, is like really slow down. And part of the slowing down process is starting to get in touch with feelings is one part of it, but also tapping into the energy of the planet, as Temple said, right? We're starting to maybe feel things that we haven't felt in a long time. And so animals, I always think about this, when a tsunami happens, like especially the one in 2004, the water goes out before the tsunami happens, and animals instinctively run to higher ground, right? They're aware of something happening. They're more in touch with the energy of planet Earth, and then they run to higher ground. And a lot of human beings are like, wow, that's cool. And they run out into the water to their death, right? So we instinctively rely on energy. We're instinctively very aware of the energetic field of the people around us and of the planet. We often talk about communication. We know that only about 10% is verbal. Many people think the other 90% is body language, but I actually think that's another small portion. Most of it is energy. And we come into this world, our little brains aren't even developed yet, right? We don't even have the cognitive ability to understand what's happening. So we take on the programs from the people around us, right? And if you look at trauma work, it's recognized that we carry the trauma from 7 generations back. So that's about 150 years. If you think about what was happening on the planet 150 years ago, and that we've taken that on, that's why I know all 3 of us really recognize that actual spiritual development or recovery is really more about unlearning. It's much more about unlearning than it is about learning. And I thought, it was about learning. I need to learn these principles. I need to learn how to do the affirmations, or as Temple said, go to therapy for 20 years and try to figure out the pattern. And I remember thinking, okay, now I know where all this stuff comes from, but now what? Okay, so I get it now. It was because of that experience that I developed these core beliefs, but what do I do with that, right? So if we recognize that we come into the world open, wide open spiritual beings, and then we start collecting all this stuff that we put over our light, then it must be true that recovery or spirituality is about uncovering and discovering that essential beingness. And that's a really different paradigm. That's a very different way to look at it.
Yeah. That's so true. And I'm thinking about how, we're being called as a culture to learn to live in both and.
Yes.
And that's, it's not what we're programmed to do. We're programmed to either have something because we purchased it, or we've lost something, so we need another something. We're programmed to, I'm happy, and oh, it's not okay for you to talk about happy right now because so many people are sad. And it's like, so in evolution, you get the point that you're happy and sad simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
That you can be crying your eyes out and you've lost your dog, or your mother is dying, or the love of your life doesn't feel the same, and you can be as sad as you can be, but in the same way, your soul has a core of happiness, that you know that there's so much more to the world and to your life than you can probably even language. So when we're living in the both and, we don't belong to anything. We come from a greater place of detachment, and we're not enslaved by one opinion of a doctor, of a teacher, of a preacher, of media, because we live in this both and world. And it creates such a sense of groundedness, within us. And that's one reason it appears that often we seem so divided, and even more so in the last era of politics. It's like I said one time, I never thought I would see a president that picked one party. What about all the rest of the other people, on the planet? It's both and. And that has been my saving grace, is that joy, the acronym for joy is just open yourself. And that's what Buddha realized. As someone said, how, Buddha, can you have so much joy, or how can you have so much happiness? And he said, because I'm able to sit with my pain.
That's right.
I'm able to sit with my pain, because if you are both and, then if your pet dies, you're going to go right away and get another one, because you're not going to spend the rest of your life never wanting to hurt again, because you're only hurting yourself, you see. And so you don't resist something, because you realize that the greatest secret of life is to have your heart open. Does that make sense? Is that
absolutely? Yeah. No, I love what both of you were saying. And if we could rewind a little bit, because both of you touched on something that I'm really curious about, and that is for someone like me who's maybe spiritually inclined, but not as experienced as the two of you. When we talk about the collective energy, and we talk about the energy of Earth and of our ancestors, I can conceptually understand that. I can wrap my mind around it when I try and tap into what that feels like, or the difference between my feelings and the collective feelings that Temple you were speaking to, and TJ with the signals and energy from Mother Earth, right? These are things that I maybe can't tell, maybe, or it could be a little bit difficult. So what, for people like me who are somewhat tuned into that, how can we hone in on that? How can we refine that?
Well, I'll thank you for saying that, Jeremy. First and foremost, for me, it's always about curiosity. I have this new acronym that came up in one of these talks, and that is COP. And I always make a joke. I never thought I was going to be a cop, but now it means curiosity, openness, and presence, right? And that emerged as a way of recognizing that it's really a state of being, right? Another way to say it is, my mind thinks it's about figuring it out. Now, I don't know about the two of you or anyone who's watching, but I did spend a good decade, maybe 20 years, trying to change my thinking and try to change my mind. And it is useful to a point.
To a point.
To a point. Because then I woke up one day and thought, oh my gosh, it's not about changing the story. It's about recognizing that that story only lives in relative reality. So that's what Temple is speaking to. It's not this or that. Duality is suffering. When I live in duality of good, bad, right, wrong, I think I need to get rid of that and have more of that. My dog dies, it's horrible, so I need a new one to feel joy. Rather than that, I recognize that all of that is something that lives in relative reality. So, Jeremy, to get more specific about your question, it would be curiosity. So I start to feel something and I might say, oh, I'm noticing that I feel sadness. I'm curious about that. Let me be present with that. And then, as Temple said, Is this mine? Might it be someone else's?
Mhm.
You know, and there's this great story of a person who goes to the master teacher and says, how do I learn to forgive others? And the master teacher says, there are no others.
Right,
I
right.
really get that when I really understand that we're all part of not just a not just theoretically that we're all one, but to really recognize that we're one. We're all particles of one source energy. And when I really understand that, then there's no longer an us and them and a good and bad and right and wrong. And when I move into becoming a cop, curious, open, and present, I can start to question all the assumptions that I have about the world, all my points of view. And Temple said something that I think is really important. It's okay to be happy right now. It's okay to be in joy. And we can have it while simultaneously allowing myself and the world to also have sadness. You know, it's not about this or that. I remember one day I woke up, I had these two beautiful little chihuahuas, and they were my first dogs in my adult life. And I literally woke up one day and thought, oh no, they're probably going to die before me. It did not occur to me. No, and they did, right? They did. And I had 17 years with them, and I allowed myself to grieve. But what I noticed is, you know, I grieved for a couple of days, and then I felt joy. I felt joy about them and them being in my life. But I noticed that people they weren't really okay with that. They wanted me to be really sad. And I was for a day or two, but I allowed myself to feel that. And then I moved through it. And, you know, David Hawkins in his book, I believe it's in his book, Power versus Force, he talks about grief. And he says, if we actually allowed ourselves to grieve, it would pass through us in 20 minutes and we'd be finished with it. I don't know if that's true, but I like it I like to be curious about that. Can I just let myself fully feel whatever's there for 20 minutes and let it pass through? I don't know if that answered your question at all, Jeremy, but that's what was coming up for me when you asked that.
Absolutely. Yeah. What do you think, Temple?
Well, I was responding with the idea of being spiritual, because this desk is spiritual and my chair is spiritual, the painting is. So we often think of I'm not implying that you are, but just for the collective listening, we think of spiritual as something that I'm going to go choose to do. The real identification of life is that you are made of spirit in the image and likeness of spirit. And whether one participates with that is choice. But being spiritual isn't a choice. It's who we are, you see. And so when we embrace that every part of me, every essence of me, every thought, every feeling, every moment, everything about me is spirit, that is what I'm drawing from. When I draw from that, then I draw from myself much bigger than just a person that has a form that looks a certain way and my hair's a certain way and I'm a certain size and I fit in a certain package. It's fluid. So even though you see solid form when you're talking to me and I see solid form when I'm talking to you, we're really moving like this. We are fluid. We are unfolding. And it's only the ways which we are determined to make ourselves solid that we become solid, right? And so a trained mind equals an open heart. You know, in so many ways in our culture through the years, and listen, I love life. And I want to be here as long as I possibly can and triple my life expectancy and all that. And so, but there are certain things that when you live life multidimensionally and you look at things from several points of view, not just one, not with what on the collective is being promoted during commercials or in the news, you've got to look much broader than that. You have to look underneath what's being said, not just what is being said. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you look at things broad and multidimensionally, you come to understand that we have programmed people that it's all about your brain, how big your SAT is. You know, what did you get in your SAT score that prepared you to, most cases, go broke so you could get into college and wind up owing $165,000 when you graduate. We are programmed to be an indebted culture.
Yeah.
And I have never had anybody in my whole adult life, you didn't ask me what my SAT score was in order to pick me to be interviewed today. You know, no one has ever asked me that. When I got married, she didn't say, what's your SAT? We need to make sure we're hooked up. You know, and where we are going is another kind of SAT that's not measured of how smart a person is according to a book. It's your soul activating truth of really who you are. And so what I would say to people that are saying, I'm coming into my own spirituality, I would say, you're coming into yourself. You're not coming into a set of new things. You're not coming into now a new club. You're now owning that this is who you have always been. And this is one of many lifetimes that you've had. And the more you own that, the more you don't have to think about what's next. It just comes to you. You know, it knocks on your door, it finds you. Because you're owning, this is me and this is my playing field in life. Here I am, and bring it on.
Beautiful.
I want to say that I love what you're saying, and another acronym for SAT could be as spiritual as temple, right?
Oh, I'm not going to go there.
But let me say what I mean by that. That what Temple shared with us is so powerful. We're all that.
Yes,
right?
we
That's
are. We are all that.
Our essence, and the rest is illusion, right? And so I remember at some point in my journey, I realized, oh my gosh, this isn't about growing spiritually or spiritual growth. It's about growing in an awareness of who and what I already am, that I am that essentially, that we are all one. So when I make a joke, spiritual as temple, what I mean is we're all that.
Yes.
That's essentially who we are, right? And so we recover by returning to that awareness. And that can happen in an instant. It can happen in those peak moments when we realize a greater reality. And then when I tap very deeply into the essential truth of who and what I am, what is living on in this relative reality, I can become much more, almost sometimes entertained by it, really.
Sure.
You know, because as Temple said, we believe we are our story. We've been programmed to believe that we're our brain, our intellect, our achievements. In American culture in particular, we have a destination addiction. Once I meet the perfect partner, once I get that certain degree, once I get that job. Now it's the new version is once I have 1 million followers on social media. All of it is a destination addiction. And the interesting thing is, it's always been here all along. It's who and what we are. So we can call off the search and rest in who and what we've always been. And as a wise person once said, that can take a lifetime, and it can happen in an instant of remembering.
Yeah, and one thing that actually stirs for me is in that journey of trying to, or seeking who you truly are inside, your essential self, making that connection. I think for me, and in conversation with others, one thing I find in common is that especially now, we're kind of faced with our own mortality. We, you know, with everything that's going on, we're kind of maybe reminded that this isn't that there is going to be a transition from what we know to what we don't. And I feel that can be really hard to be with, because I don't know about everybody watching, but for me, I try and figure it out. What's next? What is next? Because, you know, it's like TJ said, it's that destination. I have to know where I'm going, even though I know when I get there, it still won't be good enough. Right. And so I'm just curious to hear from you two, selfishly, maybe, what you think the next chapter looks like for us.
Well, I mean, there is no next chapter. It's just in my mind that there's a next chapter, right? It's just, that's the point, right? The mind believes that there's something coming, but there's really only right here. And I think, Jeremy, you're speaking really powerfully to what I see as what is causing the greatest amount of upheaval for people during what we're calling a pandemic. I think the two things that are at the root of it that are bringing the most fear up is the fear of not the unknown, right? It's unknown. How long are we going to be doing this? When is this going to end? Those types of fears. The reality is it's always unknown in the outer realm. But the second one you're speaking to, I think, is that fear of death or fear of transition. That's why a lot of the world's religions focus on what's going to happen in the afterlife. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. What about right here, right now? Let's be curious about that. That's
Right.
why I love New Thought. We're not focused on what's going to happen after we die. We're going to focus on living. And my favorite meme that I just posted was Snoopy and Charlie Brown sitting on this dock. And Charlie Brown says to Snoopy, we're going to die one day. And Snoopy says to Charlie Brown, but every other day we're going to live.
Mm-hmm.
And we spend so much time thinking about what's going to happen. And it's really when as Temple said, life is not as solid as we believed in the external realm. When I deeply know who and what I am, I can actually make peace with what's going to happen someday, because I know very deeply that not just a conceptual idea, but the truth is there's only now. You know, when Eckhart Tolle is talking about the now, he's not talking about tick tock. He's not talking about an individual second. He's like talking about tapping into the eternal now. And from there, there's no fear. And when I don't have the fear of dying, I have more joy in living.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. Well, in our culture, you know, part of it with a lot of people is that they want to pretend that death is never going to happen. Somebody with a lot of money is going to buy a pill and we won't ever have to die. To me, my whole focus and all my work has not been about a physical death. It's not about I'm mortal and I'm going to die. More than likely, that's a definite. It's more about not allowing myself to die while I'm living. And that's where the key is, because wherever you go, you're going to take you wherever you go. So to be a vibrant light and an energetic presence is very exciting, you know, and to get young every year, even though your body may not. So that would be more of my conversation. But for me too, I think I've been a Floridian, Jeremy, for 30 plus years. And for me, with this pandemic, COVID-19, it's felt like a projected hurricane with no end date. And so we're calm in that it's going to be what it's going to be. We're not going to get all anxious. We're not going to flip out. We're not going to run to other cities or other states, because more than likely it would hit there. So it's that kind of thing. I'm not saying that we're more equipped, of course, but I'm saying that that's the way I have made that kind of comparison in my mind. But the other part of that is that the hysterical thing about our society is that 25,000 people every day, at least, die from world hunger. That's 9 million people a year without even starting the day. And there's already been several million people as of now, today, there are almost 1 million people who have died that was published of alcoholism.
Yeah.
And of course, there's probably several million more that they didn't say the cause of death. Do you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of things that are reflecting around us called suicide.
Yeah.
We have people your age, Jeremy, that are taking their lives every second. Yeah. Unbelievably so. So those are the things that when I talk about looking at life multidimensionally,
Mm-hmm.
I think that this is unfortunate and one of the most fortunate things that's happened to us in a long time. And I can't imagine what the families feel and the doctors and the nurses. And I am not making light of any of that. But in the bigger picture of this universe, we have crises that are going around and have been. The issue is that we have desensitized to their reality. National Geographic, we are desensitized when we see those children starving to death. And we go, well, that's not about us. That doesn't affect us. You know what? It does.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I got kind of windy on that, but
no, I love
it. Again, it's about the biggest thing with anybody is don't let breaking news break you. Keep
Mhm.
things in perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Keep things
Beautiful.
in perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you for that, Temple, because there are so many things we could point to, right? And I did look at, the energy around what we're creating that we're calling a pandemic. And again, as you said, we're not trying to minimize what someone is experiencing, but we also know that in every 3 months, so this has been around for about 3 months, and I'm using only American statistics, 9,000 people die from gun violence every 3 months in our country.
Yeah.
17,000, and I might not be, I'm doing these from memory, so they might be a little off, but 17,000 from overdoses, and something like 12,000 from suicide. And as Temple said, those are only the ones, I lost a dear friend of mine died from suicide, and on his death certificate, it says accidental death. So we don't even know how many more people, right? So, and we're not saying, oh my gosh, there's all this other stuff that's horrible too. What we're saying is that in the midst of what we call the human incarnation, right? And I love our common friend Michael Beckwith says, we are not spiritual beings having a human experience. We are spiritual beings having a human incarnation.
Yes.
So when we really boil it down to the greatest truth is, as Temple said, it's all spiritual. We're spiritual beings having a spiritual experience. And when I embrace it all, I can be free. When I reject and I only want, why is that happening? It's horrific. And then I start pointing fingers. It must be her fault. It must be his fault. Blame is one of the lowest forms of human consciousness. It is an opportunity right now at this moment, just like every moment, it's an opportunity to know ourselves more deeply, to know who and what we really are. And then from there, we can be a beneficial presence on the planet, because if I'm not in division or good, bad, right, wrong, I can rest in a greater reality, and then I can be the light. I can be love, and I can then be a beneficial presence on the planet.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, in the 60s, you had the both and news. You actually look forward to it. You'd have the morning news that was telling you about the challenges. You'd have the afternoon and the evening news to tell you how good it worked out. You don't have that era anymore. It's how horrible can it be? And it's guaranteed, as horrible as it is, it's only going to get worse.
Right.
And if people click on that and they have all those openings on their measures of analytics and everything else, then there's going to be more of that. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that it has really hit the root of people being afraid. And how shocking that people are finally realizing, oh, there is a thing called death and they're going to do it. Yeah. But my knowing and my prayer is that they will make peace with dying every day. Yes. Because you're either living every day or you're dying every day, all based on the choices, that you made. It's one way or the other.
Beautiful. Really well said, Temple. Thank you so much. And I think as we conclude, I want to thank you both, obviously, for this awesome conversation. And as we wrap up, I'm wondering if there are any concluding thoughts that you had or affirmations to offer for people out there watching.
Well, I would like to say something to you that came up for me earlier. Okay. Just because in the measurable of this human life experience that I have more age to my years, or I may have a few more experiences, would never mean that in any way that I would measure up and be more evolved or more spiritual or more wise or anything than you are. That's a societal belief system that's put upon us. And so I just felt guided with my heart to say that to you. that is the greatest gift that I learned to give myself, is not to ever compare myself with somebody else, because you never know 20 years from now when you look at their life where they are or what happened or how they're measured. You know what I'm saying? I'm not implying that you did that. I just wanted my heart to say to you that who knows, in the Buddha energy that you have, who you are. I mean, we could be sitting here right now with a master that is coming into being. And I just felt that I wanted you to know that, and to feel that you know, life at a glance means one thing, but the deepening of who you are is something altogether different.
Thank you, Temple. Wow, beautiful. Thank you.
Wow. And what I'll say is, you know, as we started this conversation, we started the conversation with choosing happiness.
Yes.
What I love about our conversation is that we allow it to go wherever it needs to go. But isn't it amazing that in the end, it comes back to choice? And the choice is either unconscious or conscious, right? And I love, love, love what you said, Temple. Every moment I'm choosing to die or live. Right. And at this moment, can I choose to be curious about my worldview, my point of view? Can I recognize collective consciousness for what it is? I don't need to fight collective consciousness, but can I question it? Can I question, what am I getting from turning on the news? What would it be like to turn it off and see what happens?
Right.
What would it be like for me to say, what am I making this mean? What are the infinite possibilities? You know, I am recognizing that this conversation that we're having is a beautiful byproduct of what's happening on planet Earth. And when I really understand that it's not good or bad, it all is. It is what it is, but I have a choice in how I view it, right?
Sure.
Everyone watching right now, if it's 5,000 people, they're going to have 5,000 different opinions at least on what's happening here. We all have a point of view, and when I'm fixed in my point of view, what gets created is what I call reality. But what if that's not actually reality? What if there's something much more mysterious happening here? What if there's something much greater happening here? And so what I invite anyone who's watching is, can you ask yourself in this moment, what are the infinite possibilities? How else might I view this? What is mine to learn here? How am I evolving into my greatest yet to be? You know, these are the questions that actually start to empower us, empower me, empower all of us, rather than keeping us stuck in our old way or our limited way of seeing and being. So as always, thank you, Temple. Thank you, Jeremy. This has been really fun.
Oh, yeah. And I just feel called to say there's this sweet story of an elderly woman that gave up her home place to move into assisted living. And the driver took her to her new assisted living quarters, and they met her up front, and they said, you know, Mrs. Smith, let us go and show you your room and what your room is going to look like. And she said, well, why do I need to do that? And they said, well, because we want to make sure that you like it and that you're going to be happy here. She said, I don't need to see my room. I decided before I made a decision to come here that I was going to be happy.
Yeah.
It's not the room that's going to make me happy. It's my decision to be happy that has made me happy. And that is exactly what you're saying, TJ. Not that I feel in any way I need to add to that brilliant close that you already said or one up you in any way. But when things happen in your life that you don't have any control over, which would be most things 90% of the time, the best thing we can ever do for ourselves is to pre-decide that we're going to be better once we walk through the other side of it. And when you do that, that's the way it always happens. Because you pre-decided that that's what it's going to be. And that winds up to be the truth. So that's what I hold for everybody listening. Go ahead and decide that when this is a story of our history, and you're on the other side of it, that you're so much more alive, you're a lot more awake, you're living every day and not dying, you're making choices that matter, and you will be. And that's really what it's all about. That's as big a secret as it is to live in this life and to live from choosing happiness and to have joy.
Beautiful.
And thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you both so much. I really enjoyed today's conversation, and I hope that we can do another one sometime with Temple. I think that'd be a lot of fun.